Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us today during this era of a new pandemic. I just want to let you know that this is a recorded event, which we will be sharing with you afterwards. We do have everyone muted, so please post your questions in the question feature through the session, which is below your webcam and your mute functions on the toolbar of GoToWebinar. Well, we will have time at the end of the session to address questions. I'll introduce myself. I'm Melissa Hughes, and I joined Workplace Options in 2019, bringing over 20 years of experience in employee assistance and human resources. As a senior account manager, my industry specialties really are insurance, public sector, benefit consulting, IT, and pharmaceutical. I currently account manage over 28 clients globally, with members ranging in the volume size of 800 to 200,000 across the world. In my personal life, I'm also a volunteer for Halton Regional Police Services, and I work 24 hours a month as a volunteer crisis responder. I'm going to be your moderator today, and I will introduce our panel. But first, I'm going to introduce Alan King, who is the President and CEO of Workplace Options. Alan is here to thank you for joining and welcoming you to the session. Alan has over 35 years experience, and he is a veteran of the employee and well-being experience. Alan's been with Workplace Options since 2002. Alan.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. And as she said, welcome to this webinar on behalf of Workplace Options. Everyone at our organization, we appreciate both your interest and your time. You know, there really is nothing I can say about 2020 that wouldn't be an understatement. This clearly was not the year we expected. It was definitely not the year we wanted, but it is the year that we were given and the year that we survived. And for many of us, it is also a year that saw growth. With the announcement and the release of vaccines, we're beginning to anticipate an end to this pandemic. And as a result of that, there's already a nostalgia that's beginning to surface for a return to normalcy or establishing something that's akin to a new normal. Our expectation, and at the heart of this session today, is about something different. That while hopefully there's not another pandemic in our immediate future, there will continue to be significant challenges and volatility in our world that requires a new approach that brings into each of our lives and into our corporate lives a level of resilience against the volatility of the world and a recognition that constant change is the only new normal in our lives. So I hope you find this webinar of use. And once again, thank you for participating.
Thank you, Alan. So before I introduce our panelists, we're going to launch a quick poll. We'll have it up very quickly for about 15 seconds, and we ask that you complete it, and I'll be sharing the poll results later on in the presentation. So as we enter a new era of the pandemic, please rate how you would rate your own personal anxiety level. Wonderful, thank you. So now I'm very excited to introduce our team of panelists. On the line we have with us today Manisha Ministry. Manisha joins us from CSA Group. She is the Change Management Senior Director for Health and Safety. Manisha is CSA's, as I mentioned, Senior Director of HSSE and Change Management. She leads a global team of HSSE professionals who work collaboratively to manage the organization's health, safety, security, and environment program, which includes COVID-19. In addition, she provides change management leadership to key projects across the organization. Next, I'll introduce Dr. Kenneth Thigpen. Dr. Kenneth joined the Workplace Options team in May of 2013 as Clinical Operations Manager and transitioned to her current role in 2019. As VP of Clinical Crisis and Specialty Services, she specializes in developing specialty teams, streamlining and implementing processes across global service centers, maintaining unified processes and service quality while adapting to varying cultural contexts. Kenneth holds a PhD in International Psychology from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, as well as a master's degree in social work from East Carolina University. And finally, I'll introduce Dr. Tarak Sardana. Dr. Tarak has a wealth of experience supporting medical operations and organizations in austere and hostile environments. His entire career has been focused on delivering healthcare to organizations such as the Canadian Armed Forces in various locations, as the Arctic, Haiti, Rwanda, Syria, and so forth. As well, Dr. Tarak has always functioned as a frontline healthcare worker in various emergency rooms and clinic settings throughout Canada. His training commenced with his MD from the University of Ottawa and continued when he obtained his specialization in aerospace medicine from the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. He was bestowed as a Fellow of the Aerospace Medical Association in 2019, and Dr. Sardana is keen to support our clients in their operations throughout Canada. He joins us from International SOS. Okay, before we begin discussion, I just wanted to look at the poll results, and the poll results indicated 62% of you feel quite a lot of anxiety from the pandemic. Our first question. So I'm going to reach out to you, Manisha, to start. Can you tell us about what employee needs you've observed and how you're currently responding to them, and then any future plans you're putting into place?
Yeah, absolutely. The pandemic has been definitely an interesting opportunity for most organizations to really discover how their employees, need to be communicated with, as well as what type of information they're looking for. Since it started, we've been quite open and transparent on all fronts on what we knew, what we didn't know, the good, the bad, the ugly, really trying to give them a handle of what was happening with the business, how it was likely to impact them, as well as what their needs were. We have been lucky enough that we have a solid leadership team and a very active CEO that jumped right in the front line and supported really a cross section of folks in the organization to sit at a table and really figure out how we were going to manage ourselves through the pandemic. But with our employees, it's definitely acknowledging the situation.
Yeah.
And the fact that we were all in different types of situations. I'm a mom of two, and we've talked about this, and the struggle of just navigating the organization and then a household through the pandemic, and now realizing, the day-to-day effects on employees, but as well as children, and how things manifest in different ways. So it's been enlightening, and we've asked our employees to be transparent with us. Tell us what you need moving forward, and we continue to ask them. Right at this point, it's been how many months of continued reinforcement of what we can offer them, what services are available, what managers need to do, how employees can reach out, and continuing to reinforce that we're all in this together.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Sardana?
Yeah, well, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. So a couple of points before I get to my answer. I'm the medical director for International SOS Canada, where we support operations in, the energy sector throughout Canada, but I also advise several large corporations in Canada through International SOS, that have a global reach. So I think we could spend a lot of time on some of these things, and I agree with Manisha in that transparency is key, and a lot of these are kind of cliche or motherhood type statements. But what I've learned in dealing with my clients and my own team is that there's not one solution that fits for everyone. We've gone to a model where people are working from home or remotely, and for some people it's fantastic and they just want to stay home and work from home forever. But I think we don't realize that maybe working from home for some people isn't the be all and end all that it can be. And Manisha mentioned she has 2 young kids. You know, it's difficult perhaps to work from home and deal with kids at home. We don't understand everybody's own circumstances. So what I've noticed is there's almost a bit of stovepiping in some of the teams, in that some people just want to work at home forever, but not one solution is going to work for everyone. So I think we have to acknowledge that we don't know what everybody's home situation is in terms of work-life balance or just the ability to work from home. I think we're going to see the pendulum swing, not all the way back to where people are all going to the office and we're not going to have everybody working remotely. But I think we've learned from the pandemic that we can function remotely for a lot of stuff, but we do need to get people back to some form of office work, if you will, because of the human connections we need with our coworkers. And the main things that we miss by working from home is the ability to build culture and train new hires. So people can start with a company now, not meet anybody for a year. You know, there's no way to onboard, maintain corporate culture, you know, have those water cooler type talks that are critical for, you know, having a healthy workplace. So I would say just be open-minded that what the solution we have now might be good for some people, but it doesn't fit all for everything. So I'll just leave it for that. I know we're going to get to other areas that'll probably branch out from this.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Kenneth, what would your experience be?
Sure, thank you. So I would kind of sum it up to maybe 3 different categories, which would be flexibility, safety, and stability. So for many employees, they needed some form of flexibility when it came to their needs. So whether that was, okay, we have this standing meeting at 9 o'clock every day, but now overnight at the drop of a dime, I now need to log my child onto school, virtual school. So you know what, Dr. Knatt, I'm going to be 5 minutes late to that meeting. Or can we change our standing meeting if it was more of a one-on-one, because now there's something that's different? Or maybe it was flexibility where some individuals needed, because of maybe their partner was at home and they were also working and their children weren't self-sufficient. And so some individuals were like, okay, I can work this first 4 hours, but now I'm going to need to take a break to give my partner some relief, and then I can log back on. So the first thing that I would say that we really, really saw was flexibility. The second thing was safety. I want to be safe. I want to know I'm safe. What can you do to tell me that I'm going to be safe? And so for some individuals, being safe was transitioning to the work from home environment. Like Alan was stating, it's almost been a year that we've been working from home. Part of that was due to some mandates where there were, you know, the complete shutdowns. But then when things started opening back up, we could have gone back into the office, but when we started listening to our employees, we understood that they wanted to feel safe. But we also can't forget about those individuals who are our essential workers. They're on the front lines, and so they're still going into work. They don't have the luxury to work from home. And so it's about, how do you make those individuals who are on the front line, who are essential workers, how do you make those feel safe? So many people wanted to know, are you requiring some type of test at different frequency levels? Are you doing temperature checks? Are you using hand sanitizer? What type of masks are being required to go into the office? Not to mention, you have some people who have to commute into work. So how am I going to feel safe? But it's not just the safety of that individual. I now have to come home. And I have little ones at home. I have elderly parents at home. And so that safety extended beyond that one employee. And then the last thing that I would say, it goes to the stability. Individuals want to know, what does this mean for me? As we know, there's various industries, some fared better than others during this time of the pandemic. And, you know, we're still seeing some effects of that. And so during that time, people wanted to know, what does that mean for me? Is our company stable? Are we going to be okay? Because what I've seen is, you know, some people, you know, companies closed, there were redundancies, there were layoffs. There were some individuals who end up taking a reduction in pay so that they could stay at work. And so what I would say about, what are individuals, doing or how they was responding, one thing that I really stand by is, it's time to humanize or rehumanize your business. And what that means is, where is that empathy? Where is that compassion? Where is that grace that we're giving to those individuals? The other thing, and Manisha said it, Dr. Sardana said it, listen. It's so easy to listen, but I know oftentimes when we say, what are we doing for our employees? And people say, well, those things just take additional time. Well, I guarantee you, if you take 5 extra minutes to listen, and that can be done whether it's a town hall, whether it's a Q&A, whether it's a one-on-one time where you're hearing the individual narratives of your employees. And from there, you're going to understand what the needs are. And again, just to echo what the other panelists have said, it's about communicating, communicating, communicating. I'm reminded of this quote that says, change is inevitable, but growth is intentional. And so as we move forward, it's important that we're intentional about the mental health strategies of what we're doing in our business. So be intentional as we have to continue to grow and evolve from this time.
Yes, thank you. That's wonderful. We're going to just launch another poll before we move into the next question. So as stay-at-home orders evolve, how have you been preparing your managers to lead their teams? There's 3 selections: set up additional training, highlight support resources, and increase check-ins. And we'll just wait about 5 seconds for everyone to complete their poll. Wonderful, thank you. So, Dr. Sardana, how do you envision your organizations or your support to your organizations 2021 workplace experience and what roles their managers play? What guidance are you giving, and how are you really advising them on sort of next steps?
Oh, thank you. Great question. I'm going to state a few other motherhood things. I think people like working in certain organizations, not because of what the CEO says or what the head of HR says, it's what their immediate manager and the relationship they have with them. So managers are absolutely critical for the upcoming time that we're going to be dealing with post-pandemic. I think now that we've sort of come through the first year, we understand what we're dealing with on the medical side. I think, vaccines coming, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, although it's going to take some time. What we haven't seen yet, and I think Kenneth would probably agree with this because it's probably more her area, but the mental health load or the psychological load, it's just the tip of the iceberg that we're going to see now. When everybody's in fight or flight mode, they've adapted to working from home, the adrenaline's kicking in, people have done okay there, but now we're going to see the effects of working from home, potentially health issues. People have lost loved ones. There's people have lost employment or they're underemployed, the financial strain, relationship strain. I can't begin to sort of overemphasize how critical the next year, 2 years are going to be to getting through the mental health damage that's gone on because of the pandemic. So for managers, I think it's critical you play the first step, in the workplace for your staff and your employees. So I think it's in the short, discussion we have, I'd say it's important to acknowledge that mental health is going to be a big issue going forward. We don't have all the solutions yet, and that's fine. That's why we're having these sort of discussions, but that's going to be the next battle, and managers are going to play a critical role, if not the most critical role, in terms of getting workplaces back.
Absolutely. And I think I say it all the time, and I say it more in reference to children, but our brains are actually not wired to be experiencing what we're experiencing. We and so we don't know the effect. To your point, we won't know that effect even maybe long into adulthood. Dr. Kenneth, what would you add to that?
No, agree, like 1,000 times over. And if people have heard me speak before in regards to this issue, the thing that I say is mental health, of course, has always been an issue. Of course, it has gone unaddressed, under-addressed, which is another whole issue. But now that we are in this pandemic, we are about to embark on a tsunami, hear me again, a tsunami of mental health issues that, knowing that employees spend majority of their waking hours working, and those same individuals are the people who are in your workforce, it's almost become a duty of care. I won't say almost has become, it has, it must. And I feel very confident using those strong words, you must. It has become a duty to care. And so when it comes to our managers, it's about how do we get our managers to recognize and respond to what they're observing. I'll never forget, I once had a manager who came to me and she said, you know, Dr. K, I have this one employee and, you know, she just seems to be acting a little strange. And so we went to this whole thing and I said, you know, these are some things that you can say to her. These are some questions that you can ask. And the first thing she did was she looked at me and she was like, but what if she starts crying? I don't know how to respond to somebody that's crying. And so that's the reality. People don't say things because they're worried about what are they going to say? Am I overstepping the boundaries? Can I say that? But you know, if you've ever been to a situation, I'm going to take us far left real quick and I'm going to bring us back. But if you've ever had an employee who committed suicide and after the fact, the response was, I should have known, but I didn't know what to do. Your outlook on mental health completely changes, guys. Everyone who's out there, it completely changes. But not only do we want to have our managers get to the point where they're able to recognize and respond, we can't forget about them. When you're speaking about your leadership team, let's not forget about them because they're the ones who are out there, who are seeing the things and who are recognizing, responding. But what are we doing for our leaders? Are we offering them coaching? Are we ensuring that they have that self-care? And so that's what I would add to the conversation, Melissa.
Thank you. And Manisha, I know you've done a lot of work. So what would you say, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'm interested a lot, you know, in the let's not forget about the managers and the leaders, and I think that's a really good point. You know, at the beginning, we really decided that even though we were asking our managers to really step up to the plate and think holistically, we needed to also consider what our leadership team was taking on, you know, taking on the burden of the pandemic on behalf of the organization and trying to be responsible for the entire workforce. And we had an opportunity. We very quickly connected with each of them individual. How are your teams doing? What do you think they need from a resource perspective? Are we doing all the right things? Is there an opportunity that's left on the table? But didn't lose sight of the fact that we needed to ask them how they were doing.
Yeah.
Right? How are you doing? How are you coping? And as we move forward, we've really tried to coach our managers through how do you have the conversation? How do you raise the red flags? And how do you stay vulnerable with your own employees? You know, trying to share with them the experiences that we have, right? So, you know, I've had scenarios where I couldn't facilitate a call because my 2-year-old is in the house. Right. And so having to hand off that duty to somebody else on my team, or having to step away because in the middle of the pandemic, I had to put my 2-year-old down for a nap. So I've been, you know, personally within the organization very open. And I think the more vulnerable we are, I think it helps employees also, you know, do the same. And to recognize, as Dr. Sardana said, is that everyone's situation is different. You know, just because someone's at home and doesn't have, you know, 2 children looking to be fed and cared for in the middle of a work day doesn't mean that they don't have needs. And the flip side of it is there's caregivers, right? So if you're taking care of you know, children with needs or elderly parents, how do we recognize that and acknowledge that as well? So it's been a lot of education really fast, and a lot of coaching. And your resources at WPAO have been, I think, worthwhile for employees to access as they have needed them. Because I think everyone starts off thinking they'll be okay, and then they hit a wall where they go, no, this is it. I need some assistance.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So the second poll results are in. We had 32% of respondents say that they have set up additional training. I'm sorry, I should probably tell you that the question was, how have you been preparing your managers to lead their teams? So we had 32% set up additional training. 77% reported that they're highlighting additional support resources, which is excellent because we can't educate if they don't know how to find what they need. And then, of course, this is really positive to see, 62% reported that they've increased their check-ins. So that's great. It sounds like people are talking, and you know, this is new to everybody. We still are going through new, and so it's okay if some of these things haven't been put in place yet, and that's why we're here to really learn from each other. So Dr. Kinnett, I'm going to ask you, actually, you know, I'm going to ask you, Dr. Sardana, to start this question. How do you deal with concerns around the resurgence of the virus and the vaccine guidelines? And what things are you advising?
Another great question. I think it boils down to, you know, communication from the medical professionals being honest and transparent about what's going on with the virus and giving honest opinions about the vaccine guidelines. There's a myriad of information coming out from many different sources about variants and vaccines and allergic reactions. And while it makes for good news, I mean, I always go back to the science, and the virus battle hasn't really changed that much. We hear about all these perhaps new technologies are coming out, UV fogging, different materials, but really the battle stays the same. I remind my clients, it's wash your hands, cover your face, and keep space. So stay 6 feet apart. If we stick with these basic principles, then the virus has a real difficulty spreading. So I know that's easier said than done in certain industries, but if we go back to first principles, always follow the science. Same with the vaccine guidelines. You know, it's not our first vaccine, it's our first COVID vaccine, but the good news is, you know, we've got 5 or 6 different ones that are probably going to come to be available for us over the next year. And, you know, again, follow the guidelines on how the vaccines were tested. So, you know, there's talk about, do we need 1 vaccine versus 2, or what's the interval between vaccines? And I always, again, go back to the science. How is the vaccine trialed? How is it tested? And we'll follow that protocols. If we start venturing off into untested territory, then we put ourselves at risk. So just go back to the science, stick with the science, and we'll be okay.
Thank you. And Manisha, I'm gonna go to you because of your role and the CSA group as an organization and the variety of different roles and experiences. So how would you deal with the concerns, or how are you dealing with the concerns around the resurgence of the virus and any vaccine guidelines?
Yeah, we've like other organizations, we're learning. I think to Dr. Sardana's point, we need to listen to the professionals. We need to understand the science behind everything that we're hearing. Employees are also understanding that we're on a journey, trying to understand how everything affects the organization. So we're doing our best. I mean, sometimes it's information overload, and I'll tell you, sitting kind of in the hot seat, trying to figure out, what we will do moving forward with respect to how we handle the workplace and our recovery strategies as more and more people get the vaccine. I mean, the most we can do right now is really, understand it, help employees make informed decisions. It's information overload across all fronts. The new variants, the different types of vaccines that are coming, the conversations about, from one vaccine shot to the other, how many days. It's almost, we have access to so much information. It's how you process it. And for some, they just go, let's wait and see. For others, every piece of information is almost too much information.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like just stop giving me this information and just tell me what I need to do and tell me what's right. And I'm sure you're hearing that from employees too. They sort of don't want any more information. It's just give it to me final when it's done, and we know. Unfortunately, we don't have a final and when it's going to be done.
And we've been okay with saying it, we don't know yet.
Yeah,
You know, we don't know any more than anybody else.
yeah, yeah. Dr. K?
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit of a different spin and kind of focus a little bit more on what, as individuals, we can kind of do as this resurgent may come. And so, you know, the first thing I would say is we can only control what we can control. And oftentimes we do get stuck in that moment of like, oh my goodness, this pandemic is going on and we want to change that. Now, we don't have control over the pandemic, but we do have control over ourselves. And so the first thing I would say, focus on the things that you can control. The second thing I would say, it's so easy to talk about all the things that we can't do, but what if we started to focus on all the things that we can do? So if you just shift that perspective just a little bit, it changes things for you. Of course, I have to mention self-care because self-care has been super important. I'll just share this tad bit with you. For me, I love, love, love music, all types of music, and I love dancing. So I have a dance party every day in my house. And so that is the one thing that has gotten me through the pandemic. So it's really about finding what that one thing or several things is for you and doing more of that thing. I think someone said it earlier, the connections, staying connected. And again, that connections may look completely different than it did a year ago, but still trying to stay connected to the individuals. And then the last thing that I would say for individuals is understand what your purpose. Why did you start doing what you're doing, despite what industry you're in, despite what job you're doing? Because ultimately, purpose drives performance.
Thank you. Dr. K, do you see signs of compliance fatigue or pandemic fatigue? Are you seeing that in our clients and in our workplace in your role?
This is a really great question because two parts. So of course there's a compliance fatigue. And to be honest with you, we are not seeing compliance fatigue like I think many people thought we would see, because what's happening is as many people transition to this work from home environment, if that was the industry that you were in, people felt their own perception based upon their own stuff. They felt the need to work more. I'm going to show my boss I can work more from home. I'm going to show them I can do more from home. So honestly, what we started to see is that people weren't taking those breaks. People were not taking time off because they're like, where am I going to go? And it's like, no, you need a staycation. We started to notice that because there's not that boundary, you know, you can easily, you know, turn a corner or go to a different room and you're right back at work because your computer's staring in your face. And so we realized that people were working more. And so we didn't see an issue with the compliance fatigue. Now, when we speak about the overall pandemic fatigue, yes, definitely 1,000%, because our world's changed. Every single person, every person that's listening under the sound of my voice that will re-listen to this, all of us experience change in some form or fashion. Of course, it might look different for each of us, but we experience that change. And so I believe, again, another panelist said it, it kind of started off like, oh yeah, we're on this roller coaster. We had this, for me, it was this magic number of 2. It's like, we're gonna be home for 2 weeks and we're gonna go back to the office. And so we're on that roller coaster ride, hands in the air, woohoo! And then we took that seat down to the bottom and I was like, whoa, wait 1 minute, like where are the vacations? Where are my connections? Where are all my routine? My routine was gone. It was snatched from me. And I had to make a conscious decision of, you know, do I find this new routine or do I still try to make this old routine work? And then all of a sudden we were back on the roller coaster and it was chugging back to the top and we're like, oh yeah, okay, something's gonna happen. And then it was like, now we're seeing, you know, death tolls are rising and the numbers are increasing beyond ever before. And so we get back to the top and then we take a dive to the bottom again. And so it has been a complete roller coaster. So, you know, when it comes to the pandemic fatigue, yes, seen it, still seeing it. When it comes to compliance fatigue, honestly, I can't say I've seen as much because people felt the need to prove themselves, because even with some companies, you know, having redundancies or layoffs, people have that mindset of, I want to be at the top high performer. So if something happens, which goes back to the stability we were talking about earlier, I don't want to be in the bottom.
Yeah. I think everyone who's not used to working from home probably feels a little bit of like, I need to show that I actually am working, and then learn how to shut down and walk away, which isn't easy to do when it's to your point, right there. Maybe it's in your kitchen, maybe it's in your living room, and you don't have another space to really shut down and reframe your day and move from work into home, right?
Absolutely.
Manisha, what have you seen any signs of compliance fatigue or pandemic fatigue at
You know,
CSA?
I think the reality is most individuals, employees at our organization and individuals in general, really we're just trying to get to the end of the year. Right. And you know, you'd start to see, you know, employees having conversations about, oh, I'll just hold my vacation, right? Our fiscal year ends at the end of March. So, oh, by that time, you know, I'll be able to get away. And, you know, and you know, most of us are sitting back going, yeah, no, I don't think anything's going to be opening up by then. But we saw kind of the great push up until December. Everyone was kind of really focused. Let's get to the end of the year. Let's get to the end of the quarter. And then you started to see come into January, you know, we know January is a big month from a mental health perspective, but the recognition that, okay, here we go again.
Yeah,
Nothing's changed. What's in it for me? Not a lot.
yeah,
And so that's been a struggle for most employees in general. I know it's been a struggle for me. I mean, you know, even recognizing that, you know, the type of music I start to listen to changes, right, as the seasons change, and, you know, the lack of sun. And, you know, I went and got you know, a happy light, you know, to try to boost, you know, the positivity, you know, so yeah, from a compliance perspective, not so much. We haven't really seen the fatigue, but from a COVID perspective, yeah, it's there. It's real.
hmm yeah, absolutely. And I think here in Canada too, we're given these little like drop-ins. It's just going to be 2 weeks, and in 10 days, it's going to be this day. And it's almost like they pick at us because they drag it out and drag it out and drag it out. So it's sort of we're looking forward to something, and then it changes, and then we look forward to the next date and it changes, as opposed to if they said, you know, March 15th we're going to be moving back to this, or that's going to happen, then people would have the hope of March 15th instead of sort of these 2 week increments. And Dr. Tarak, what would you say? What would you add?
Well, my two panel of colleagues have covered most of it, but I think a couple of cliches come out. You know, we're in a marathon. This isn't a sprint, but we've been sprinting for a year, so that's exhausting.
Yeah.
And you're right. What do people have to look forward to? I mean, in Ontario, where I'm at, we're in a lockdown basically. I mean, you take a holiday, what are you going to do? Go to a different room of your house? You know, that's really all you have to look forward to. So there's no, you know, Caribbean trip coming up in March. You know, there's nothing on the horizon in the short term to look forward to. So to Manisha's point, yeah, nothing's really changed. You know, we got through Christmas and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're back at it for a bit longer. And we got a bit more time, but we will get better, but it's going to take the better part of the year before we can see activities getting somewhat back to normal.
Thank you. Dr. K, would you just, I know this is off the cuff, but would you just sort of give a commentary around your hope message that you shared yesterday?
Yeah. So yesterday on my LinkedIn page, if that's what Melissa's referring to, on
Yeah.
Wednesdays I post a Wellbeing Wednesday tip of the week, and it's just a small tip to kind of help get us through. And it's really about hope, knowing that there is hope, and if we have hope, and hope is about, you know, finding that silver lining of, yes, things may not be going the way we want them to go, or the experiences that we thought we were going to have, we're not having, as Alan was saying when we first opened up the call. But from the experiences that we have had, you know, what is that silver lining? As I talked to, you know, some of my colleagues from around the globe, you know, one of the things they said is the time they have to spend with their children and their families. You know, maybe they're constantly on a plane going here and going there. And so that silver lining for them is spending more time with their family. I know for me, I have 2 retired parents and they live about an hour away. And being that I am in this remote environment, I've been able to, you know, go spend a week with them and work, and it's been nice to see my mom. She'll, you know, peek around the corner and be like, ooh, who's that on the camera? And it's like, hey mom, I'm in a meeting. But it's those precious moments that I would not have had, you know, before now, but you know, we are having. Part of, having hope is about, making those connections still, and, finding that positivity, because ultimately our brains are kind of wired to pick up on those negative pieces first. So what are those things that we can do to intentionally, and again, one of my favorite words is about being intentional. What are you being intentional about doing? What intentional strategies does your organization have? Because you can intentionally be more positive. And so it's about having hope and knowing that hope makes things possible.
Thank you. So we're just, before we move into the next question, we're just going to bring up a poll, and we'll leave that up for about 15 seconds. So please answer the following question. How do you assess your employees' well-being? Is it via pulse surveys? Is it manager's feedback, or you're not sure? And while we wait for that, this to be answered, I just want to remind you to please feel free to submit your questions for Dr. Sardana, Dr. Kay, and Manisha in the question box, which is on your on your go-to panel, and it's around the area of your mute or your webcam. We will address the questions at the end of the discussion. Great, thank you for everyone who submitted. So in terms of sort of employees' financial well-being, Manisha, would you speak to maybe some of the opportunities that you've used that are, government funded, perhaps specific CSA funded supports, or how you're addressing and sort of staying in tune to employees' financial well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been lucky as an organization. We didn't have to furlough any of our employees globally, which has been fantastic. But we also did recognize that, we didn't know every situation that our employees were in with respect to their spouses or partners, and how that would be impacting them overall. So what we did was we stepped back. We looked at all of the service providers that we work with from a benefits perspective as well, and to see how they could support our employees identify and navigate through whatever they were dealing with. So we have been quite in tune with making sure that we had wellness webinars set up for them to understand what the impact long-term would be, and what they could do to maybe feel more confident as they moved forward from a financial perspective.
Thank you. Dr. Sardana?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, like a lot of stuff with COVID, the answer is it depends. When you ask 3 doctors, you're going to get 4 different opinions. But really, the financial impact really depends on the industry you're in. In terms of, let's talk dollar and cents purely. I mean, if you're in a government sector where funding, you're still getting paid. Obviously there hasn't been an impact there. Some of my clients are busier actually in the pandemic. They're consulting, doing engineering work, stuff still happening, so they're doing well. But then the other sectors, your restaurants, your mom and pop shops, all these people, they're suffering tremendously. So I think the range is depending on the industry you're in. The effect could be negligible to catastrophic.
Absolutely. Kenneth, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would just say, when it comes to the financial piece, in some situations, it can be seen as a means to meeting someone's basic human needs that they may have. So if their basic human needs aren't met, of course, it then begins to provide challenges in other areas of their life. So again, when it comes to that financial piece, this can just ultimately be another stressor in an individual's life. And that's the difference between maybe my mental health and somebody else's mental health. When you take a look at all the additional stressors that may be going on, and then you add on this financial stressor, like you said, Dr. Sardana, whether it's because, and Manisha, whether it's because, their partner lost their job, or maybe both of their incomes have been gone, or maybe their resources have been cut significantly than what they're used to, that's another stressor. And that additional stressor adds to either the chronic stress, it adds to the anxiety, or adds to the depression. That again, these are the individuals that are in your workplace that are needing your help, and it's just something to kind of keep in mind.
Thank you. So just the results of the poll. So we had 24% respond that pulse surveys are how they're assessing their employees' well-being. 66% responded through managers' feedback, which is great. And then we had 10% indicate that they weren't sure how they were assessing employees' well-being. It's really great to see how much value there is in monitoring your employees' well-being based on these results. So this is a great question. Manisha, I'm gonna start with you because I know you addressed it earlier, and I think that you know, we work together, and I know we communicate quite a lot about this. But how would you say you're communicating your employee support resources to them, and maybe to their family members as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Very early on, we were very clear with our employees that the resources that we were making accessible to them were to them and their families, because that was important. But we also find that on a variety of different fronts, even diversity and inclusion. We realize it's not just us dialoguing with our employees, we're dialoguing with their families.
Yeah.
So with them, with the resources, we've tried to make sure we provide access. And so we share, we continually reinforce all of our resources through managers' newsletters. We provide access through our internal website. We try to weave the messaging into as many different mediums as we can. As we know, things come through email, it's a blur. I call email like a bit of a black hole. Things go into it and it gets lost. People are just kind of flicking through emails and they miss the key ones that tell them that these resources are available. So 7 different ways of messaging is kind of the way we approach it. Keep telling them, keep reinforcing them. They may not need a resource today. They might need it tomorrow. It's been critical for us too, as well, not just to send information by email or electronic means, but having the conversation in town halls, big town halls, department meetings, make sure that everyone knows all of the resources that are available. And there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
So continue to tell the story, continue to reinforce how we're supporting them. And that's been important because you do recognize that in some conversations with employees, they'll make a comment and you'll say, we do have that resource. But if it wasn't relevant at the time the information was in front of them, you got to remind them.
Yeah, I've said that for the 20 years I've been in the communication space, that if you don't need it, you don't necessarily retain it, and so you have to continue to communicate. Dr. Sardana, would you add anything around communication?
Well, I'll go with my standard answer. It depends on the size of your client and your organization, but most of the forward-thinking clients, the larger companies are reminding staff, their employees, about the employee assistance programs that a lot of them have set up and put in additional resources and funding, for that capability. And then other things like Manisha mentioned, town halls, mental wellness, just try to bring it to the front burner so people are aware of it through various forms of communication. Some have hired mental health professionals, which is a challenge in this time because there's going to be no shortage of work. So it's difficult to necessarily find somebody that fits the culture of your organization, but some companies have started in that process as well. So like everything, it's a multi-pronged attack, different forms of communication, different resources, but they're doing it. They're starting to recognize it, as was sort of mentioned in your survey results that you just talked about.
Thank you. Dr. Knet?
I think the other 2 panelists have covered it all. But again, I'll just echo the sentiments of, oftentimes on that first day when there's onboarding, you receive a pack of papers and somewhere inside it talks about the employee resources and you're hired and you're like, woohoo. And then you put your paper somewhere and you kind of forget about it until, like you said, until you need it. But it's about continuing to share that information, not just once a year, but how do you infuse it infuse it into your culture so it becomes very normal that, you know, instead of waiting to have those uncomfortable and unashamed conversations or ashamed conversations, that we're talking about it and then infusing it throughout the culture. And so think about the places that your employees have to go every single day. So if there's certain systems or logins that they have, or is there a way to have a scrolling banner or maybe a pop-up box so that even before they put in their credentials, this pop-up box comes up and it says, hey, just a reminder. And the other thing is just making it accessible and super easy to find. So it's not like one resource is here and one resource is there, but almost having an employee resource corner or a center where they know that very easily I can put my hand, click, and I can see a menu of all the services that we offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Just wanted to remind you, we do have a handful of questions coming in, but wanted to remind you, please do feel free to submit questions in the questions box. So our last question of the day is, Dr. Kennett, has 2020, I think the panel has addressed this, but maybe we can just circle back about it. Has 2020 impacted your organization's culture on mental health?
Yes, and it should for everyone. And if it hasn't, I encourage you to stop, pause, pivot, and decide if you need a reset. So stop, pause, pivot, and reset depending on what you need to do and where you're at. But like I said earlier, it has become a must. It is now your duty to care to ensure that you're providing not just physical benefits and physical services, but holistic, including those mental health services. It's no longer a nice to have, like, oh, we might have it. It's no longer nice to say, oh, we're checking this box to say we're having something, but our utilization is like 0.5. It's no longer good enough. I'm sorry, it's just not good enough. And so it's really about, you know, taking stock of what are we currently doing? What do we have? How are we utilizing that? What don't we have? What is our intentional strategy, and what tactics are we going to put into place in order to plan, not just for World Mental Health Day, not just for World Talk Day, not just for World Suicide Prevention Day, but it has to be ongoing. The other thing is really about understanding, you know, what's working, what's not working, but also what is our return on investment, but also our value on investment. Two completely different things, your return and your value on investment. And so, yes. And again, if individuals are not, I strongly encourage you to definitely do so.
Thank you. Anisha?
You know, I think stepping back and looking at the organization as we've kind of navigated the pandemic, I think the recognition that we're human, and that, you know, we have to be vulnerable to be able to really lead people. And in the end of the day, you know, we have a very active CEO who from the beginning has sent a Monday morning email to all of our employees, a very candid, here's where we're at. You know, this is what's going on. This is how I'm dealing with things. And, you know, the fact that there's lots of unknowns, and those emails are candid, they're authentic. And our employees globally are, you know, they hang on the every word. And so I think that's really shown us that, you know, in the end of the day, we are human.
Yeah.
The sense of connection and belonging needs to resonate across all the different ways that we connect. You know, employees are looking for, you know, a manager, and I think Dr. Sardana, you know, said this quite well, was, you know, in the end of the day, the organization is really the frontline manager. And that relationship is so important. And I think the relationships moving forward have gotten stronger. You know, some relationships, you know, depending on how frontline managers dealt with things, hopefully have improved. And some relationships are flourishing. So, you know, I think it has changed the way organizations interact with their employees. I think overall, resiliency has really come to the surface as an important attribute of an organization, and then as individuals. So yeah, it is. I think it's really changed the game moving forward. And I think Dr. K said it best. I think part of it is really sitting back and thinking about what's our purpose. So, I think some organizations are having that discussion, and individuals are having that discussion about, what is it that I'm here to do?
Yeah.
What's going to fill my bucket? So it's interesting conversations that everyone's having.
Yeah, and I think you've been very honest about the messaging and the communication to humanize and make your organization feel connected and humanize their leadership team. But what that also does is there are people who don't necessarily believe in the extensiveness of the pandemic or have personal bias around work from home positions or essential workers. And I think that leadership message pushed down shows that that's an organizational message, and it's important, regardless of our own personal biases, to be able to be in tune and follow that particular culture throughout the organization. Yeah. Dr. Sardana, would you add anything about that?
Yeah, a couple of points. I think if you feel your organization hasn't been impacted by some sort of mental health load, then I think you're living under a rock. I think that you're in denial. Now, let me take it from a different angle. Let me be blunt per se. We're talking to companies that their goal is to go out and generate business and make money, whether it's for their shareholders or for themselves. And let's not kid ourselves, that's what we're doing at the end of the day. But to have a functional, great company, you want healthy workers. So there's the financial benefit to taking care of your workers, having them well, and to Kenneth's point, probably a duty of care now, keep them healthy, and that's going to help your bottom line. You have less absenteeism, more productive, happier. There's not going to be people, you won't have the turnover, the training costs. So taking care of your folks is the right thing to do, but it's actually also good for your bottom line.
Thank you. So we've had a handful of questions come in, and I'm just going to put these questions out to the team or to the person that they're addressed to. And wanted to remind everyone attending, please do feel free to type a question in the question box, and we will do our very best to address it live now or with follow-up items. So the first one is for Manisha. Manisha, what are some ways you can onboard new employees virtually in a way that they can feel connected to the organization?
That's a great question. And we haven't, we're still figuring things out as well. We had a request the other day to consider doing even site tours virtually. Again, joining an organization in the middle of a pandemic and working from home, not even knowing what the inside of the building where my seat will be looks like.
Yeah.
Not to mention, for us, what do our test labs look like? And what does a test environment look like? And so, we've been onboarding employees, since we started. I mean, we had the week that we went off, which was, I think, really the week before a majority of organizations decided to do so. We had new employees joining. And I think that the communication with the frontline manager is critical, because they are representing the organization and starting that journey with the employee. But yeah, no, we're looking for opportunities as well. We've talked about, strapping a GoPro on, some of our on-site staff to walk through the facilities. I mean, our CEO has also mentioned, wanting to, put up his FaceTime video and walk through the halls for existing employees to see, what does it look like? I can't remember, what the hallway looks like anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think we face the challenges like everybody else. I think providing a variety of different forums for new employees to connect is really critical. You know, meeting the team virtually, having employees who don't necessarily come on camera, to put a face to colleagues is
Yeah.
important, right?
Yeah.
And seeing each other one-on-one is important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. K, we've experienced a significant amount of growth, and certainly, you know, it's a unique environment to be able to have clinicians work remotely. And so, how would you say, you know, what suggestions might you have for certainly?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is individuals want to feel like they belong. We all do, right? So there's no difference when you're joining a team. And so we really think about how do we still make someone feel a part of, as if they belong and that they are connected. You know, something that we do is we still do, you know, lunch with our CEO, meet the CEO, where, you know, when new hires come on board, yes, it's virtual, but they're still able to break bread together, which of course most people like to eat. I love to eat. But when you involve some good food and some good conversation and meeting new people, I think that's great. But also, you know, that water cooler talk or spinning your chair around to talk, or, you know, when you used to be able to, you know, walk to the restroom, get a snack, and you come back and you stop and talk to two colleagues, that is gone. And so we have different team channels, and one may be called water cooler talk, one may be called, you know, what'd you do this weekend talk. And so people are able to go in there and we're able to engage each other to make that happen. And then again, of course, it's about, you know, also that one-on-one communication. So yes, they're still creating group forums in order to make those connections, to make individuals feel like they belong, not just to your individual team, but to the larger department and then the overall organization. So it's kind of thinking about that systems perspective of how do you connect those individuals to the systems within your organization. So, you know, those are just a few things that we've done.
Thank you. Dr. Sardana, would you have anything to add?
No, I think that's been covered very nicely.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Kennett, what would you say would be some good suggestions to determine virtually if an employee is struggling emotionally?
You know, something that, you know, there may be varying views on this, but I'm definitely a visual person. And so there's part of the setting the expectation of, as a company, what do you expect? So part of the expectation is, you know, when we meet, the camera is on. And so I'm able to see and hear, because sometimes just hearing someone, they're saying like, yes, I'm fine. You know, it's a politically correct answer. It's the answer that we're used to giving. But when you're able to observe what's not being said, sometimes it creates a different picture, and sometimes it creates me to ask the same question twice. So, how are you doing? No, really, how are you doing? And I cannot tell you how many times I have said, how are you doing? For real, like it's like for real, how are you doing? Do you know how many tears I have had because that individual or those individuals were just waiting for someone to ask them that question, and to be authentic and to be human, to say, I'm not doing well. And so, of course, you know, if someone doesn't have their video on, it does become a lot harder because the only thing you have is sound. And so you're relying on how an individual sounds in order to help make a determinant or to point out an observation of what you're actually hearing, the audio piece of it. And so for us, as a company, something that's really huge is that, you know, videos are on, and so that we can see, you know, is someone maybe for the first 8 months they were coming to the video calls, and, you know, not that they had on their 3-piece suit, but they at least had on a nice shirt from, you know, the waist up. And then all of a sudden you start seeing something change. It's okay to say, hey, I noticed, I observed, how are you? Is there something I can help with? I just want to let you know that I'm here to support you, or we do have the resources that are in the, you know, resource corner, employee corner that, you know, are there. So it's giving people opportunities, because sometimes, as much as we might hate to admit it, some individuals need that permission. I mean, we grow up from a young kid getting permission to do certain things, even to some degree, maybe on our jobs in our adulthood, we're still waiting on permission. And so if individuals are not at a place where they can give themselves permission, where I would love to see all individuals be, but I also know that all individuals are not at a place where they can give themselves permission. So it's me holding that space for them to give them permission to be okay, to have those uncomfortable conversations, to have those unashamed conversations, because I don't want to take us back to another step, but this is where it really becomes important of destigmatizing mental health in the workplace, where it should be introduced in our culture from policies, procedures, missions, values, everything that we do, where it becomes okay.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Sardana, how extensive is the organization's responsibility to communicate pandemic-related information?
Oh, that's a good question. Again, it depends on the organization to a certain degree. I think it depends on if you have a medical specialist on your team, you know, a corporate medical advisor, then it's a bit easier to have that capability to spread the word out. If you don't have that, you could assign a COVID compliance officer, an individual that could pass on the information. It really boils down to what the vision or how the company sees their role in that communication. I would encourage, you know, more communication is better, and at least the message is consistent, and you're getting it from hopefully a more reliable source than, you know, some of the news channels who like to sell negative news and are not, you know, negative to watch sort of thing. So it depends on the size of the company, but most of the clients I have somebody that is communicating information and taking questions. More importantly, you know, what's the company doing for vaccines? What's the position? Or are we going to some of the early questions, are we going to mandate vaccinations? And while we don't know these answers, it's a two-way street.
Manisha, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think we have to be very mindful of you know, the information that's out there. You know, we're very careful making sure that the right information is accessible to our employees. You know, and so we may have a landing page for COVID where we do have we do put in our quick links, just because, you know, we're not in the business of you know, disseminating COVID related information beyond what's already out there. And so we, you know, we help our employees navigate through, you know, already legitimate and reliable published resources that are already out there. Yeah.
Thank you. How would you say organizations, this is really for the group, how would you say organizations are deciding who'd be eligible for remote work?
Sorry,
I'll start.
Yeah, so how do, you know, how do organizations determine who's eligible for remote work when maybe they're an essential service, or you know, what's the best practice around who should be working remotely and who should be in the office, or if you need, perhaps if there's space issues, maybe that's in line with the question.
Go ahead, Manisha.
Yeah, I'll take this one on. So we very quickly realized that, you know, we needed to protect our lab operations, our testing and certification business. And so we very quickly took everybody else off-site into a working from home situation. So right now we have about 10% who are on site and the 90% working from home. And so that was a very quick and clear decision, because our testing staff can't test a refrigerator from home. And so that was an easy one for us. But we very quickly realized everybody else have the capacity and the capability to work from home. And then, you know, when we start talking about what return to site looks like, it'll very quickly as well identify who needs to be on site as we start to ramp up again. There's going to be folks that, you know, want to be on site because being at home is not conducive to a, you know, a positive mental health experience, whatever that looks like. And so they might, you know, come back faster. So there's a lot of variables to consider, but starting with, can they do their job from home?
Yeah, I think I spent a lot of time helping companies through their COVID protocols on their return to operations planning And to Kenneth's point at the start, I think safety boils down to the first thing, can people get back to the workplace safely from a COVID perspective? But again, it boils down to what the company's operational requirements are. And clearly, certain services you need to be somewhere to do it. Whether you're a firefighter, can't really do that from home. You need your truck.
Yeah.
So it boils down A, to the operational requirement, and then B, what safety level can people who want to go back in the office, what density are we looking at, what protocols do we put in place, plexiglass, hand washing, testing, all this sort of stuff. And then they have the ability to go to work. I think the companies that I work with are not mandating people to go back in the offices, but they're making it an option, saying, look, the office is safe, and most of them are. They're probably safer than being out in the community in general. If you want to come in, you can, but we're not going to force people to come in. Going back to that, we don't know what the circumstances are for that individual, whether, like Manisha was saying, maybe coming into work is the best thing, or maybe staying at home is the best solution. So you make it optional, and that decreases the stress of being forced back into work when you're not, unless, of course, you're an essential service, but that's a different story. But yeah, interesting question.
Yeah, I hear a lot from my clients, that they have an employee who's indicating that they don't want to come in because of their personal situation, but the employer doesn't see how that works out. And so I've heard that a lot through the pandemic. Kenneth, would you add anything before I ask our last question?
No, I think it goes back to the whole "it depends" answer that has been provided. Where I know what some organizations have been doing is they've been taking a survey for people who are starting to return to site, of doing a survey of, do you want to come back to the office? Do you not want to come back? Are you open to doing, 2 days on, 3 days home, or vice versa? And starting there, because when you start there, based upon, I don't know, some companies I know they're looking for a quota or a number of how many people they would like to see in the office. And so when you look at who wants to come back and they're like, hey, it's me, you may be where you want to be. And then if you're not, it's kind of looking at the decision tree of, okay, now what's the next step? If it is, doing more of a hybrid model, which I do feel like many companies who are in the industry or capacity to do so, they may go to the hybrid model. And I think the next question that's going to come about is, if everyone doesn't have a workspace and it kind of transitions to the shared workspace, because some companies are choosing to maybe downsize their building or facilities because they are going to hybrid model. And if I'm having the shared workspace, again, it goes back to the safety of, what are we doing to ensure the safety? Are you having to, pick up all your equipment and take it with you because you may not be at that same station the next time? And then, having a sanitation station where you're having to go and wipe things down. So there's so many factors to put into place, again, based upon the industry, based upon individuals' needs. So a lot to kind of take into consideration. And we're all learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have one final question. I don't believe any new questions have come in. And, I think this is sort of a multi-panel question, because we're all from different, we all have different personal experiences, but feel free to jump in, whoever wants to respond first. What are some tips to juggle caregiver responsibilities and professional responsibilities?
Oh, that's a good one. I can start. Again, it depends on the day. Depends on the age of your kids, your physical ability in terms of space in your home, if you have a partner that's working. There's so many variables.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is it's going to be completely different probably for everyone. So I think you have to figure out what works for your situation, and nobody can really judge that for you because we're not living your struggle, so to speak. So I think the key is to let your employer know what you, like Kenneth saying, what you can control, what works for you, and negotiate, and hopefully they're on board. You're getting your work done, but I'm going to work from 10 at night to midnight, because that's when my kids are asleep. I think everything's on the table, and if it's reasonable, I would encourage managers to accept it, if operationally things are getting done.
Great point, thank you. Manisha, you've been pretty open throughout, how CSA Group has helped to manage this, but do you have any final thoughts around it?
Yeah, I think to build on Dr. Sardana's point, it really comes down to being pretty open with your manager. Very quickly, I was very transparent. For example, this is my situation. I don't know how things are going to work out. And then over time, because I think everything got so blurred, you felt like you're working all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, then got to a point where I think you have to start putting in some boundaries. This is, I'm going to start my workday at this time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, I'm going to eat in between. I'm going to step away. I'm going to take the dog for a walk, whatever it looks like, just to get away, because we can, and maybe, to Dr. K's point, maybe it's compliance and over compliance because you think you're compensating or you have to compensate. And the reality is we are all human. We all need downtime, because it only makes us better employees in the end of the day.
Mm.
So from a personal experience, I've been pretty candid about my needs, my expectation. I took a day off the other day, whatever, the days off look like now, just to reset. I couldn't, I was getting into a bit of a funk and realized I needed to step away. My team needs that too from me. But I also, as a leader, need to set to lead by example, right?
Mm.
So I'll say, yeah, I need to step away, and it gives permission to those that hear that to do the same.
Yeah.
Because, I think Dr. K mentioned sometimes people just need the permission, whether
Yeah.
it's intentional or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I think our leadership team at Workplace Options has done a great job with that too. And we've really been encouraged to do what we need to do to manage our own personal well-being, but also to integrate our personal responsibilities as well. And I remember in the early months, I felt like all I did was sleep and work, because my computer was there and stuff needed to be done. And so, as time moved on, I just found the best thing for me was to your point, setting a schedule and sticking to it. And it's been a much healthier experience, really, since I've set a normal work day. Just because the emails come in after hours doesn't mean they need to be responded to, right? Dr. K, would you add any words of advice?
No, I just echo the same sentiments of, setting those boundaries. I'm huge on setting boundaries. I cannot say I've always been like that, but again, those are the lessons that you've learned on your journey. And so just like Manisha was saying, like, if my workday is scheduled to end at 3 or 3:30, I now set my alarm and it gives me the 30-minute warning, like 30-minute countdown. So it kind of triggers me to start, wrapping up for the day. Now, yes, there's going to be the unexpected where there's that thing that comes up and it needs to be handled, but it cannot be an everyday occurrence. Part of also setting the boundaries is because you're working from home and you're living at home, before we used to have the commute in between, many of us, if we weren't already working from home, we would have the commute that kind of signified, okay, I'm ending the day at the office. I'm getting on the train, the tube, I'm getting in my car, the bus, whatever it is. And that's kind of my decompression time. But now we're doing life and work at home. And so what are those things that can help signify your brain that it has come to the end of my day? Some things that I know some people have done is at the end of the day, and I have one coworker who does this, whether it's raining, whether it's snowing, but they go for a walk. Her and her family will go for a walk because it signifies to the family, it signifies to her that this is the end of the work day. And so they always go for a walk, and that's their transition plan. Also in setting those boundaries, I think people are hopefully getting better, but I know in the beginning, people were working in their bed, on the couch, in the kitchen, they were working everywhere. So then it's hard to really separate work from home. And so when I leave out of this office, the door is closed, the computer is down. I have a cell phone for emergency needs. If you need me, call me. But I'm not going back into that computer because it's super important for my own mental health.
Yeah.
That I have those boundaries in place. And I think the other thing when it comes to those boundaries between working from home and those caregiver activities is having a routine. So if you have a routine of when I'm in this consistent space, you know that, you know, mommy or daddy or grandma or whoever is working. Yes, there may be the things that you may need, but for the most part, is there something that signifies that, yes, I'm working, but it's okay to be interrupted? Is there something that signifies that I'm working and I need this 30 minutes or this hour because I'm doing this webinar? And so I don't need you hopping in and saying, mommy, I want some fruit snacks. Of course, there's always the unexpected things that happen, but I would say the two things is, you know, setting boundaries. And again, I'm going to use the word, it's being intentional about setting those boundaries. And then again, you know, having that routine, whatever that is for you, but also being okay to change your routine.
Yes, thank you. And we had one last comment come in, which I think closes this up perfectly. So we want to make sure that we don't shift the work of others to the people without children, which happens a lot by default. And I think that's a really incredible closing comment. Well, we have had wonderful conversation. I want to thank you, Manisha. Thank you, Dr. Tarak, and thank you, Dr. Kennett, for joining today. Hopefully, our attendees have learned something and had a moment to shift. You know, had an enlightening moment, and we've offered them something to think about. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we will share the recording once it's complete. Have a lovely and healthy rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You.